me to introduce you to the concept of the Me Too car using an M4 and this. You see, the BMW two-door sort of performance car to which the Dodge says, Me Too. The BMW 3-liter inline turbocharged 6 to which the Dodge says, Me Too. The BMW can be had with over 500 horsepower to which the Dodge cheerfully says, Me Too. Which brings us to our job today. We have to determine if Dodge has created a bargain basement discount M4. Okay, so the last time you and I were behind the wheel of a new Dodge Charger, it was the better part of 6,000 pounds. The good news is it's gone on a diet, somewhat of a crash diet. 4,850 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 2,200 kilograms without it. Oh, a little bit of a delay there, but man, when you get into like 4,500 RPM, not only does it take off, it sounds magnificent. Now let's talk about that mass as it relates to the bogie, the M4. The bad news is this is not a lightweight. This is still 900 pounds heavier than an M4. I'll put it another way, that is 4 to 5 adults, basically the amount of people you can fit in this car, or that is one very large polar bear. Now, all that aside, I am kind of shocked to say this. There is refinement in an engine from Dodge. Like, I would expect this kind of refinement. It's not BMW levels of refinement, but it is better than what's out there. Granted, one can't argue with the silky, smooth torque delivery of a 6-cylinder, and that's what we have here. Beautifully matched to this 8-speed, I'd like to point out. Okay, so admittedly not the smoothness of the BMW, but there's a pageantry here that's very welcome, that's very unexpected. Granted, not quite the power delivery of a Hemi, it's not trying to be that, but I would argue this is a very quick, very large car. I must admit there's slight growl to this engine. Unexpected, but I like it. So I have to nerd out about a remnant of the EV development of the Daytona flavor of this. There is no mechanical release for the hood. Instead, there is an electric button to release what they still think is a frunk. Now, if I'm honest, the Frunk, you could barely put one White Castle in there, so this is a much better use of space. Anyway, that gets us back to our Thesis. Now, I will admit the last segment, Thesis really didn't hold up. But here, straight across the plate, and follow my logic here. If you know BMWs, you know B58s and S58s. This is the way you nerd out in talking about different outputs of the 6-cylinder engine. You'll see in the S58, that's like the M model. That has like a buffet of outputs. There's a 479, there's 503, 523, and then there's a special model on top of that. The folks at Stellantis, they're scratching their head and they're like, I think we can cash in on this. But first, they came up with this engine, the 3-liter, the 2 turbos in line, and they put it in Jeeps, really big Jeeps. Then they decided to put it here, which we can get into that in another discussion. But in terms of outputs, they were like, kind of like hold my beer here, BMW. Because the outputs, there's two, there's the cheap seats, 420, 468 torque. And then there's this. This one is 555, and then the torque 531. So really they're going to that, I don't want to say limited production M4, but they're going to that more special M4 output right out of the gate. Now there is another aspect to this entire thesis, and that is How many drive wheels? Answer 4. In the BMW world, there is an all-wheel drive M4. It's called the Competition. It comes only in the higher output. That's where we go back to this thesis getting closer. The two cars, very similar output, very similar drive wheels. There's another thing that's similar to BMW, but more from the M5. This all-wheel drive system, you can decouple the torque to the front wheels, effectively making it a rear-wheel drive car. We arrive at the most challenging aspect of this discussion. Not just the way it drives, but the size. What you are looking at here is a deceptively large car. This has a wheelbase very close to that of a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, a four-door. It is 10 inches longer in wheelbase and length than the BMW. It dwarfs the BMW, and as such, it doesn't feel as nimble as the BMW. But putting that aside, I'm shocked how refined this thing is to drive. Like, I love these Challengers. Like, maybe it's a guilty pleasure of mine. Maybe it's because I did Target Newfoundland in a Challenger. But those refined, they were not. They were very much a sledgehammer. They were from a time gone by, and they weren't trying to be anything different, and that is a good thing. It's trying to bat above its station in life. Is it successful to a BMW level? Not exactly. But does it embarrass itself on roads like this at the size of an S-Class? That's the unexpected part. And I feel like that's kind of a theme with this. Unexpected. Maybe that's what we should call it, the unexpected M4. Now, I don't want to be Captain Obvious here, but this whole discount M4 thesis rests on the money. And in case you've been living under a rock, a Dodge is usually cheaper than a BMW. Here, by a lot. The basic SixPack, meaning a 6-cylinder Charger, the one with the 420 horsepower output, that, I don't want to call it a bargain, but it's 50 grand, $49.95. This one with the 555 horsepower, that one is $54,995. Now, yeah, that sounds like a lot of money, but think about other cars that have that kind of output that look like this. I personally love the way this thing looks. Then we go back to the M4, the Competition with kind of similar output, actually less than this, all-wheel drive. That is an almost $83,000 car, so the delta is just under 30 grand. So that's the discount part. This car, of course, has a number of options. It was supposed to be red, but I believe the West Coast marketing group of Stellantis stole it from me, so I got Ludicrous. Not a problem, because blue is my favorite color. That is an additional $700. Basically, this car has $12,000 in options. Things like the glass roof is an option. There's a $5,000 option to get things like a head-up display or a bigger screen. Believe it or not, the interior, that is optional. Some of this trim, that's optional. Then we have to pay $1,995 for destination and handling from the exotic port of call of Windsor, Ontario. Although I find something fascinating here. This car, 25% of it was made in Hungary. Who knew? That brings us to a total retail price of $69,355, which I'd like to point out is about 4 or 5 grand cheaper than a most basic 479 horsepower M4. Anyway, I digress. Then we get into reliability. I can't talk about reliability here because this is a very new car. It's just barely out. And the car that came before it, the EV Daytona, we learned the hard way wasn't reliable. That car crapped out on us twice. In fairness, I don't want to call that reliability. I'm calling that you were a beta tester buying that car, and that played a role in the resale value. The resale value of Daytonas, Charger Daytonas, 24, 25s, abysmal, doesn't even begin to cover it. When I shot that car a couple of months ago, you could get like the base one, the RT, and at a base price of something like 65 grand. the dealers were selling them for 35 grand, brand new. So resale of cars with miles is less than that. And keep in mind, the one we had was the super duper Scat Pack. That one was $83,000 in base price. Those I'm seeing resale for around 40 grand, and I'm seeing a good amount of them. In comparison to the BMW, no matter what flavor you're looking at, the BMWs generally return about 70 to 75% of your money after about 3 years. Granted, you get more back if you have a better version or better options. So overall, this is 100% proof that this is a discount M4. And oh yes, I am wearing my American flag socks for a car made in Canada. Now, if you've been paying attention throughout this episode, it's pretty clear Dodge is trying to reinforce performance. What I don't understand is the paddle shifters. So you've got that transmission works beautifully personality-wise with that engine, and I feel like I could use like manual shifting. However, I don't want to do it because the paddle shifters they're like little itsy bitsy baby. They're cute paddle shifters, but they're not usable. They look like a regen button that they put on the steering wheel of electric cars. Perhaps they can go with something like almost Ferrari or Maserati-esque, where it's attached to the steering column to reinforce, like, okay, it doesn't have a manual transmission, but we remember those days. So Tony and I, that's the gentleman behind the camera, he and I have been nerding out about this thing because we both love the way it looks. If I'm honest, Tony likes it more than me because Tony's got a problem. Tony drives an EQE, and that's not good. Anyway, back to the realities of this thing. It's attractive, but it's functional more so than most BMW M4s in that it's a hatchback. So you got this button here. You see, once it comes down, it turns into a coupe. Granted, it looks, as we talked about in the Daytona episode, like a 69 Charger, which, fantastic, although I'm not a Mopar guy. But here, you would never think it's a hatchback. And then you add in the fact that it doesn't have that goofy, like, front end where you've got, like, the front spoiler and the fratzoid. It actually kind of looks, if you look at the lights, I know I'm nerding out big time here, but if you look at the lights from the side, inside what is like the frame of the 69 Charger, it almost looks JDM inside of American Muscle. And then last but not least, the change in design of this vehicle from the electric is the hood. So you've got this huge, you could call it a power dome, but there's a certain, the sight picture to this thing, it's menacing. That's the only way to describe it. And for that, I say, bravo. So yes, a lovely exercise, but a budget M4, this is not. Which brings us to the good news and the bad news. Let's start with the bad news. A lot of body roll, which needs to be sorted. Good news, there's a lot of like Auburn Hills Chrysler DNA in there, meaning it's not as much of a luxury car as the Charger EV that we drove last year, which brings us to kind of the headline. This is a much more modern, refined Mopar. Now, I know that sounds hysterical to some of you, but follow my logic here. You see, this car replaces a car that came out before Barack Obama was president, which in turn was based on the hip-hop era 300C, which in turn had mechanical bits from 1990s era Mercedes-Benz cars. So instead of like a BMW M car on a budget, this is the most important Dodge has made in over 20 years. Now, while you are arguing this in the comments below, going to answer the obvious question, why do I have this? And what is it? You see, this is probably the most magnificent shoehorn you will ever witness. I mean, look at the size of that thing. And I am willing to offer this free of charge to the folks in Auburn Hills. Why am I willing to make this generous offer? Because you know that this needs a different engine, and this is the tool that will help you install the proper engine in the forthcoming Charger. So please take me up on my generosity. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.